In Chapter 4, we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about feature detection, and we're going to talk about drag and drop, which is a new feature of HTML5. So what is feature detection? Feature detection is finding specific properties or methods in a browser's DOM to detect the browser type and whether it supports a given operation. Now, the DOM stands for Document Object Model, and I'm not going to go deep into that because it would just be too much to cover. It's basically, it looks at everything on a web page as an object, whether it's a p tag or a heading or even the document itself, or the web page is the window itself. There's a window object, there's a document object, there's the navigator object, but I'm not going to go deep into that, but that's how feature detection is done. It uses the DOM. Feature detection is not browser detection. They used to use the navigator object. They check the navigator object and the user agent property to find out the exact browser that the user was using, not the feature itself. And this isn't, it's very unreliable, which is why it's not recommended anymore. We have much better ways of doing that, which we're going to go through right now. And that brings us to third-party JavaScript libraries like Modernizr. Modernizr, it doesn't try to detect the browser, it detects the actual function or method or property. We could test for the canvas object, we could test for drag and drop, obviously, which we will be doing in the programming part of this section. And it's a much simpler code. When you would check for the user agent, you'd have 4, 5, 6 if-else statements, and just the code got cluttery, and it didn't even work some of the time. I mean, now if you look at the Modernizr code, it's as simple as this. You're just checking for the property, and that's it. You can download Modernizr for free. It's open source at modernizr.com/download, and it actually is a page where you can pick and choose which properties and objects you'd want to check for. So if you only wanted to check for, say, canvas or any kind of CSS3 property or selector, you could do that, and it would lighten up your code a little. So Modernizr is definitely, in my opinion, the best, but there's also other JavaScript libraries that you can use for feature detection. So how do we implement Modernizr? If you go to the page and you see you have a development version, there's a production version, it can look kind of complicated, but it's really not at all. I mean, all you need to do is generate the file and download it and include it in your HTML, and this is how you would do that. You would do it in the heads. First of all, you'd add a class to HTML called no.js, no dash hyphen whatever JS, and then down here you just include the script, the actual file that you downloaded, that you generated, and we've gone over this, how to include external scripts. So that's pretty much it. Once you've done that, you can use the functions and you can start using Modernizr. So Modernizr creates its own properties for each feature that it checks, that it tests for, whether it's canvas, drag and drop, and you can refer to these properties to check whether the browser supports the object and its properties. So here's an example, very simple. If Modernizr creates an object .canvas, if it's supported, then you would add your HTML5 code. If not, then you could display a message saying update your browser or whatever it is you want to do. And Modernizr is also very useful for CSS3, for the new CSS3 selectors and properties. Here's an example where you'd want an object or an area on the web page to have a gradient background. Okay, now you saw in the couple slides back we added the no.js class to the HTML tag, and this is what would happen if the browser didn't accept the new CSS3 gradient properties or selectors, and it would just have a background image. You would have to create a glossy image or a gradient image, and it would just default to that. And if the browser did accept the CSS3 gradients properties, this is what it would do. It would do the background image, and then this is all CSS3, the linear gradient function here. So very useful for CSS3. So now we know how to detect certain features such as drag and drop, and now I'll get into a little bit of the syntax for drag and drop. Now, like with most aspects of HTML5, we need to use some JavaScript to do the calculations or processing or animations or anything like that. So the first thing is that we need to set the draggable attribute to true. So if it's an image that we want to drag, we have to have this attribute and set it to true. Now, obviously, you'd have your source. You know, you type your image in, the link to your image, but we do have to have this attribute. So we made the object draggable. Okay, we made this image draggable. Now what we have to do is specify what will happen when the element or the object or whatever you want to call it is dragged. Okay, and the onDragStart attribute calls a function, which is this function, drag event. Event is the parameter of the drag function. Okay, and that specifies what data to be dragged. Okay, if that makes sense. And then we have the ev.dataTransfer.setData method, which sets the data type and the value of the drag data. So this would be the value of the drag data and the type, text. Okay. Alright, so that brings us to the next part of the code, which is event.preventDefault. Now, what this does is, by default, the data cannot be dropped into other elements. To allow it to drop, we need to prevent the default handling of the element. So that's all we're doing right here, is just preventing the default action. Okay, so sorry about that. And the last thing we have here for our simple drag and drop script is the drop function. Okay, and the drop function takes the event as a parameter. Now, when the drag data is dropped, this event occurs. So we have the event.preventDefault. Okay, this is up here. It's going to prevent the default setting, so we can drop it, drag and drop it. And then we set this variable called data to ev.dataTransfer.getData text. Okay, you saw the slide before. We had the setData function to set it to text and the value, and now we have the getData function, and we're getting the type. In the last line, we have the target append child document.getElementById from the data. Okay, so it's getting the ID of data, and it's appending the child. So that'll actually do the drop. So we'll be able to drag something and drop it in. And this will be a lot easier to explain or to show you when I'm actually doing it. It's kind of hard to convey this code to you in English. So with that said, let's dive in and start coding. Alright guys, so in this part of this section, I want to demonstrate both feature detection and drag and drop in the same video. So the first thing we have to do here is go to Modernizr.com, and Modernizr doesn't have an E between the Z and the R. Just make that clear. And we have a development version and a production version. We're going to download the development, and this is what I was talking about generating your file. Now, these are all the things that Modernizr tests for or can detect, and we can pick and choose which we want. You know, we could disable a lot of these if we wanted to lighten the file a little bit and increase the performance in our website. You'll see we have drag and drop right here. Obviously we're going to keep that checked. I'm actually going to keep all these checked, but just to let you know that you can pick and choose. And then you generate the file, and then you can download the file. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I set this drag and drop an empty folder on my desktop. I'm going to download it to that, and that's where I'm going to build our application. And I'm just going to save it with the default name. Okay. Now you'll see if you go in the program right here, this is the section 2 program files, and this is what we're going to be doing is we're going to have this div, this box here, and we can drag and drop the HTML logo into the box. Nothing spectacular, but it's a good little introductory type of application. So you'll see if we reload, it goes back. Whoop. Now you can imagine the things you'd be able to do with drag and drop in a browser, file management and so forth. So the next thing, let's close this and go to our new folder, and all we have here is the Modernizr JavaScript file. Now I just want to create an index file, okay, and I'm going to save it in that folder right next to the JavaScript, and I'm going to call it index.html. Alright, so now we have index. Now we just need the image, so I'm actually going to go back into the project files, okay, and get the image, copy that, and I'll bring that, paste it. Alright, so now we have all our files that we need to build this. Alright, I'm going to leave this open, and then let's open our index.html with Notepad++, and it's an empty file. So right here I'm just going to paste in, let me just grab we just need our standard layout, our boilerplate for our HTML file, okay, head, and we'll put a title of just drag and drop. Okay, I'll save that. And let's just open our file, and we have nothing. So the first thing I want to do here is just set up the divs in the image. So we're going to do, let's just look at this while we do this. We're going to put in a heading tag in H1, and we're just going to say drag the HTML5 logo into the box. Okay, save. I'm a little OCD with this. I like to check every little thing I change or add. I like to check. So the next thing under the header, we're going to make the div for the box to put the HTML5 logo in. Okay, so we'll say div ID equals, I don't know, div1. And now we want to add some, actually I'm not going to add the JavaScript attributes yet, so I'll just close the div. And then under that I want to do image src source, and we're going to put HTML5.jpg. Okay, it's in the same, the image is in the same folder as this file, so we don't need to add any kind of directories or anything like that. So let's save this, see what we got. And we have a div which you can't see yet because we haven't added a border or gave it a size. So now let's do that. And I'm not going to link any CSS style sheets. I'm just going to do the style in the header just because it's convenient. And for style, we want to do the div. Sorry about that. We want to do div1. And what do we want to do here? Let's do width 240 pixels. Okay, and height will be also 240 pixels. Let's just throw some padding of 10 pixels, and let's do border. Okay, we'll do the shorthand for the border, so we'll say 1 pixel, and we want it to be gray and solid. And we also want to float this left. Okay, so let's save that. Alright, so now we have our box and our logo. Now we want to add the attributes for the JavaScript so we can call a function on an event. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is make the logo, I want to make the image draggable. So we're going to add the draggable attribute, and we're going to set that to true. Okay, and the next thing I want to do to the image is I want to add the on drag start attribute. And you probably remember we talked about these in the slideshow, in this section slideshow. So here we want to have the drag event happen, and we'll have event as the parameter. Okay, so on drag start, when we start to drag it, it's going to call the drag event, the drag method or function, whatever you want to call it. And now we want to do to the div, to the empty div here, we want to put on drop. Okay, it's the on drop attribute or event, and what we want to do there is the drop event. Okay, I mean the drop method with the event. And then we want to add another attribute called on drag over. Okay, and that is going to call the allow drop function. And we'll have event as the parameter as well. Okay, so that should be it for the HTML. We have draggable true, on drag start we'll call the drag method, on drop we'll call the drop method, and on drag over we'll call the allow drop method. So actually I should have showed you how to use Modernizr first, but we'll just do it after. It's very simple to implement. So let's just get this, we'll get all this done with, and then we'll implement Modernizr, and we'll have an if, if drag and drop is able on the browser, then to continue. So let's just do our JavaScript. I'm going to do it in the head, on the style. I'm going to do it in the head section. I'm not going to link any extra files just for simplicity. So we'll do script type text JavaScript. Okay, and then close the script. Alright, so now, actually, you know what? I'm going to implement Modernizr now. So we have the file that we downloaded right here. I'm going to actually just copy this name, okay, so we can include it. We just need to include or link it to the HTML page, and we do that in the head. So we want to do script type equals text JavaScript, and we want to do source, and we want to put that file name in the source, and then we just want to close it and then add our ending script tag. Okay, so now the Modernizr file is linked to this HTML file, and I'm going to just test that out really quick by opening the JavaScript file. And I'm not going to explain any of this because the Modernizr file is pretty large and would be very complicated for me to try to explain. So, but I just want to make sure it's linked, so I'm going to do an alert and write it's linked. Okay, and then we'll save that, reload, and it's linked. So now just make sure you get rid of the alert, save it, and close it. We won't need to open that again. Alright, so now I just want to do a little test to see if drag and drop is enabled on our browser. Okay, and it's very simple. Actually, first I want to explain something. We're going to do alright, so this right here is the syntax of how you would test for something. If you wanted to test for canvas, you would have if modernizr.canvas and then whatever. I'm going to go back to drag and drop, but there is something, if you want to use the drag and drop, you have to add another piece of code. I'm going to do that right now. You have to add another condition, and it's this window.file reader. And the reason for this is that there is in fact a set of drag and drop event handlers, and they're supported in IE 8 and they go all the way back to IE 5, and these are they are the same events in the old version because the HTML5 standard basically formalized what IE was doing already. So we have to test for this in order for some of the older IE browsers to be able to tell if drag and drop is enabled or not. So what I'm going to do is just create what's going to happen if the browser is in fact able to do the drag and drop. Okay, and I'm just going to do a document write, and whoops, I'm going to say this browser can use drag and drop. Okay, and it's just going to write that. It's just going to print that to the browser, to the screen. And then if it doesn't, we're just going to add a not. A user cannot use drag and drop. Save that. Let's reload our Chrome browser, and it says this user can use drag and drop. This is the latest version of Chrome, and if you have the latest version of any popular browser, I believe that they all can handle drag and drop. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open this IE tester, which is a very cool tool for any kind of web developer. You can test sites on all versions of IE. I'm going to open IE 8 and go to that same page, and now you'll see it says this browser cannot use drag and drop. So, and I'll show you this. We haven't implemented the actual application yet, but I'll leave this open so that we can after we program it. I did want to do the Modernizr thing first before we even did anything, but what are you going to do? So I'm going to keep this for the not if it's not available, and we're going to put our code, our drag and drop code, in between here in the if, you know, if that feature is enabled. So we're going to start with, one second, going to start with the allow drop function, which is right here. Okay, so we're going to do function allow drop, and the allow drop function is going to take the event parameter, and all we're going to do here is do ev dot prevent default. Remember, we talked about that in the slideshow. We're just preventing the default behavior. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is the drag. We're going to do the drag function, and that's going to take an event parameter, and that you'll see is right here. So the image, when we grab the image and we start to drag it on drag start, we're gonna call the drag function, which we're going to define right here. Okay, and it takes event, and then we have the event parameter. So here we're going to do ev dot data transfer. Now this is the same code that we did on the slideshow. So we're going to set the data, not the data, the data, and we're going to set that to, I'm going to set that first. The type will be text, okay, and then ev dot target dot id. So that looks like that's what we want. I'm going to separate this a little. So now we're going to do the drop event. Now for the drop event, we're going to call the allow drop function. I mean the prevent default function. I said function, so I started typing it. Alright, so ev dot prevent default, and now we want to create a variable, and we'll call it data. And what that's going to do, we're going to be the ev data transfer dot get data. Okay, we did set data up there, now we're doing get data, and that's going to be text. And the last line, we want to do the append the ev dot target dot append child, and then we want to do document dot get element by ID, and we want to get the data ID. Okay. Oh, okay. I actually missed. The image should have an ID. We should have done this before. The image should have an ID of drag1. Okay. That looks good. Let's save that. It looks good. And there we go. We can drag it over, place it in the box. You reload, you can keep doing it. So that's that. Oh, I wanted to show you if we did it in a browser that doesn't allow drag and drop. So let's refresh this, and you'll see nothing happens. I can't bring it over. So that's working. It's all working correctly. That's it for drag and drop and feature detection. Next, we'll get into probably media, some video and audio stuff. And thanks for watching.